The Devil Game, Part 1. This is a set of instructions for how to speak with the devil, which, as those of you with any sort of brains might know, is a patently moronic proposition on the face of it, one likely to culminate in any number of thoroughly unpleasant fates. Honestly, it would probably be smarter to publish your credit card number on Facebook, or take up a career in crocodile wrestling. But then, that isn't going to stop you, is it? Not if you're sincerely interested, at least. Technically, if you do everything just right, there's a fair chance you'll walk away scot-free. And that seems to be the reason enough for some people to decide that it's a good idea. Especially if you're the fate-tempting, thrill-seeking, scare junkie type. Or the desperate type. Which brings me to a point of clarification I'd ought to make. This is not a manual for making any kind of Faustian bargain. You know, the whole sell your soul type of deal. Although, if you happen to bring it up in a conversation, he certainly wouldn't be one to refuse. Following through with such a foolhardy bargain, however, would necessitate removing some of the protections which you will put in place for your conversation. And I don't think I need to spell out for you why that would be a bad idea. If you're really mathematically impaired enough to want to trade something that will last an infinite number of years for something that might last about 90 tops, there are plenty of other rituals out there for you to follow. This one, if performed correctly, should only allow the two of you to talk. This perhaps begs the question of why exactly you would want to speak to the devil in the first place. Maybe some of you just like the idea of making small talk with extremely dangerous occult entities. But for the sake of the human race, I hope most of you aren't quite that stupid. Short answer is, he knows things. Things that some of you may have a deep, vested interest in finding out. I mean, he's not omniscient or anything, but as he might like to pretend otherwise, he's not God. But he's definitely got a supernatural advantage over the kind of knowledge any human would be able to obtain. For example, he probably wouldn't be able to predict when the next world war would happen, or tell you the cure for cancer. But he could very well be able to predict the winning numbers of tomorrow's $500 million Powerball drawing, or tell you what deadly undiagnosed condition might be afflicting one of your loved ones. Of course, the Prince of Darkness doesn't just go around giving winning lottery numbers to anyone who asks, and trusting any sort of information obtained from a being commonly described as the father of all lies is liable to land you in a worse situation than you were in when you started. However, if you're really dead set on finding something out, and you've exhausted all other options, there is a way to try and get accurate information out of the guy. You see, like so many of the more urbane villains in popular culture, the devil has a bit of a penchant for gambling in games. Of course, the reason he likes them so much is because he almost always wins. Unless you happen to be a fiddler named Johnny, or you're being represented by Daniel Webster, you're probably going to get your ass handed to you. But if you are determined enough to want to face the risks and the long odds, there's a certain game the two of you can play to try and win the information you need. First things first though, we'll start off with a description of the summoning process, then get into the rules of the game, some tips on how to play, and finally, of course, the inevitable litany of arcane shit that might go horribly wrong. In order to contact your conversational partner, you will need to go to a church at midnight. It doesn't matter what kind of church, large or small, old or new, liberal or conservative, just as long as you're sure it will be empty. The last thing you want is for some preacher to walk in while you're in the middle of this, for the sake of your preacher's well-being as much as your own. The process will probably work best if you try it on a new moon, or a full moon, or Friday the 13th or Halloween. The actual date is less important than the psychological effects it has on you. As long as you don't try it on Christmas Eve or something stupid like that, you should be fine. The time is important though. You don't have to start or end the ritual exactly at 12 AM Greenwich Atomic Time or anything, but as a general rule of thumb, you'd ought to show up a bit before midnight and have everything set up no later than 10 or 15 after. Show up a lot before midnight if you don't know how you're going to get yourself in. Shockingly enough, most houses of God do tend to lock their doors at night, at least if there's no one there to watch over them. And remember, we want empty. Got it? There are, of course, certain things you will need to bring, and certain things you can't bring. For this ritual, you will need a full can of salt. You won't need to use all of it, but it's always better to have more than you need than to have less. 7 candles, red or white being preferable. Something to light the candles with. You would be shocked how often people forget this. Occult ritual or not, they aren't going to magically light themselves. A length of red string, rope, yarn or thread. A full-length floor or wall mirror. Ideally, you will want to find one of these already present in the church. They are a bit unwieldy to be lugging around with you during a break-in. However, if there aren't any there, you will have to bring your own. You might also find it useful to bring some markers, pencils, paper, a flashlight, and any sort of tools that might be necessary to secure your entrance into the church. You will not be permitted to bring any electronic or timekeeping devices. This includes all cell phones, smartphones, tablets, e-readers, MP3 players, PDAs, calculators, wristwatches, pocket watches, kitchen timers, hourglasses, etc, etc, etc. Seriously, they're worse than the SATs. If you're one of those people that has your smartphone practically wired into your brain, don't worry. You can bring those things with you into the church as long as you leave them outside the room which you will be doing the ritual. If you brought a flashlight, helpful for finding your way around the church without attracting unwanted attention, leave that outside too. Also, don't bring any sort of religious paraphernalia to protect you, especially if it pertains to the Abrahamic religions. And yes, if those gothy black earrings you're wearing are hanging right side up, they count. If you have any kind of holy symbols like that with you, the devil will simply refuse to show up. Don't worry, you're not going in fully unprotected. In fact, most of the supplies with you are not for any sort of devil summoning ritual, but for your own protection. Old superstitions and folk magic remedies to guard oneself from evil. From what I know of it, the effect's mostly based on the power of belief, so there are probably numerous other objects, artifacts, and procedures that would work just as well. If you'd like to risk being left helpless at the mercy of the devil in order to test that theory, feel free to experiment. However, for anyone without a psychotic death wish, I recommend sticking to the ritual as follows.